YouTube, what is up? James MTG Biggie here, and today I am doing a deck tech for my commander deck, which is Grand Arbiter Augustin IV. Over the quarantine, I decided to finally build a deck for EDH, and it's been a lot of fun building and tuning, especially finding new cards to make adjustments with, testing cards, cutting cards, adding new, making new additions and subtractions to the deck has been a lot of fun. For those who don't know, Grand Arbiter Augustin IV is a blue-white commander. It costs a blue, a white, and 2. It makes all of your blue spells and all of your white spells cost 1 generic mana less to cast, and it makes all of your opponent's spells cost 1 more. So generally speaking, it's a very taxing or stax style commander. Also a little bit more of a control commander than a lot of other commanders. My deck is kind of a hybrid of the three. I've built it, I started it out as more of a death and taxes style, lots of creatures that have taxing effects and stuff like that. And then I started eliminating and taking creatures out to add more control elements like counter spells and removal and stuff like that. So first and foremost, I'll go over the main win condition, because a 2-3 commander isn't exactly what you're going to win the game with as far as damage goes. So this deck is a control deck basically built around the ability to win with Approach of the Second Sun. Those who don't know, Approach is 7 mana, 6 and a white, and if it's cast from your hand and you've cast another spell named Approach of the Second Sun this game, you win the game. Otherwise, put Approach Second Sun onto its owner's library, 7th from the top, and you gain 7 life. So you cast it the first time, you gain 7 life, you tuck it 7 cards down, or after the 6th card, it is the 7th card down, and eventually you draw to it and you cast it again, and the game's over and you win. We have built the deck in a manner that we can cast this card reliably for cheaper, and also we could draw back to it quicker. So that is the win condition. Obviously, to cast our spells, we need lands and mana, so we'll go through that stuff first. We're playing a bunch of fetch lands: Polluted Delta, Prismatic Vista, Flooded Strands, Fabled Passage, and Terramorphic Expanse. Terramorphic Expanse, honestly, is a placeholder because I have other fetch lands in other decks that I just haven't transferred over here. Generally speaking, you want the fetch lands that don't make your lands come in tapped. We have a bunch of fetchable dual lands. Tundra, the best blue-white dual land that exists. Irrigated Farmland, a very good land that you could cycle. It comes into play tapped early game. Later on, if you draw it, you could cycle it out for a new card. Prairie Stream, which we play a lot of basics, so this is oftentimes going to be a Tundra for us. And Hollowed Fountain, which is the second best fetchable dual land. Those are the fetchable duals. Then we have Celestial Colonnade as our man land. This gives us a utility land that comes into play. It fixes both of our colors and gives you the ability to either attack through or protect your planeswalkers and stuff like that as a blocker. Other duels that are not fetchable: Mystic Gate, Nimbus Maze, Sea of Clouds, Port Town, Sky Cloud Expanse, Command Tower, Glacial Fortress, Temple of Enlightenment, another tapped land. We're trying to avoid playing a lot of lands that come in tapped, but I think the Scry one is valuable to fix your draws in the early game, so I enjoy this card. And Adderker Waste, just a blue-white pain land, nothing fancy, nothing special. Lots of fixing, and lots of lands that make blue and white. Then we have some single-colored lands that also offer us some utility. We have Iganjo Castle, which just makes white mana, but it allows us to tap white and tap it and prevent 2 damage that would be dealt to a legendary creature. So it helps us protect our commander a little bit from direct damage and stuff like that, or from blocking or whatever, and allows us to keep it alive longer. Also, it's not incredible, but it doesn't cost us really anything to play it. It's in place of a basic plains, more or less. We have Castle Arden Veil, which allows us to make chump blockers to protect our planeswalkers, to protect, to be able to have blockers and stuff like that. And it's a mana sink if we have a turn where we're trying to hold up counter magic through our opponent's turns and nobody cast anything worth countering, we now have something to do with our leftover mana on the end step of our opponent's turn. We also have Mystic Sanctuary. This card is incredible. It's very powerful. When we were playing Approach of the Second Sun, and if something were to happen, if somebody makes us discard it, or it gets countered and somewhere or another ends up in the graveyard, this lets us rebuy it to try again. Also, you could loop this with things like Cryptic Command. You play Cryptic Command, counter and draw a card. It's in your graveyard. You get the Mystic Sanctuary, you fetch for it, you put it in play, you put Cryptic on top, and then you get to counter things and bounce the Mystic Sanctuary back to your hand, put it in play the next turn, put Cryptic Command on top. So it lets you rebuy Cryptic Command a lot, and just valuable removal spells. If we need another Wrath or something, we can put it on top so we can get back to using our cards that can help us move our plan forward. Then we have some colorless utility lands. We have Arch of Araska. It is a land that allows us to, if we have 10 or more permanents and we ascend, we get to pay 5, draw a card. Very handy land to have in play for a long-term game, just drawing extra cards when needed. It's pretty nice, and being one of the few colorless lands, I figured this is a very good one. Drawing more cards is always welcome. We have Ancient Tomb. This lets us accelerate our commander on turn 3 because it provides 2 colorless mana. So we can go basic land, and Ancient Tomb and play it on turn 3. A lot of our deck is dedicated to accelerating out the Arbiter because the sooner he lands, the sooner you can lock your opponents out of the game and control the game. And then we have a Strip Mine. Everybody's playing problematic lands, so having the ability to blow up a land is very important and very nice. So I don't mind having access to a Strip Mine. Reliquary Tower. We abuse this card because we draw a ton of cards. We have a bunch of draw spells in our deck and a bunch of cards that allow us to draw way more cards. I don't want to discard cards that I draw, so to keep them, I have Reliquary Tower. And then we have basics. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 basic islands. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 basic planes. Nothing special. We got to make mana to cast our stuff. Keeping with the mana theme, we'll go through the accelerants that we have in the mana rocks. We are, of course, playing Mana Crypt. 0 mana. This allows us to play our commander on turn 2, which is very effective, very good. We have Soul Ring. Same thing. We get turn 2 our commander with this. And then some weird cases, possibly turn 1. We have Arcane Signet. This is just a requirement in Commander now. It's an auto-include for every deck. It fixes your mana for 2 mana. It adds 1 of either color, which is very, very good. We have Azorius Signet. Same thing. We have Sky Diamond. It does enter the battlefield tap, but it's 2 mana, so it allows us to play Arbiter on turn 3. Thought Vessel, same thing. It makes colorless mana, but the no maximum hand size, just like Reliquary Tower, is important to us because we do draw lots of cards. And then to further our theme of cost reduction for our own spells, we have Sapphire Medallion and Pearl Medallion. These two make our white and blue spells, respectively, cost 1 less. So there are situations where we have some X draw spells that if we have our commander in play and either of these two, they just make our mana work even more. Like if we Sphinx's Revelation with 1 or 2 of these in play and our commander, we could automatically, without putting any more mana into the Rev, draw 2 or 3 cards just because. Very powerful, very good. And then this is the only 3 mana mana rock that we have, and it's Manascape Refractor, which enters battlefield tapped, and it has all activated abilities of all lands on the battlefield. So for us, that Arch of Araska we have, I play Search for Azcanta as well, which you'll hear about later. Ancient Tomb, it allows us to do a lot. It can be another Celestial Colonnade effect. It duplicates not only our lands, but our opponents too. So if your opponents are playing lands like Strip Mine or Wasteland, you get a free Strip Mine or Wasteland. Same thing with like Mazavith and stuff like that, utility lands like that. You have the ability to use those abilities from your opponents too. So it's very good, and it also does ramp us. Then we have a couple artifacts that don't ramp us, but are very effective and very good. Sensei's Divining Top. This card allows us to rearrange the top of our deck to fix our draws, and also it can, in a pinch, set up a miracle. We are playing Terminus in the deck, stuff like that, very important. And then God Pharaoh's Statue, which is another taxing effect on our opponents. It is 6 mana, it costs a lot, but we can ramp to it. It makes all of our opponent's stuff cost 2 more to cast. And then on your end step, you get to drain all of your opponents. Each opponent loses 1 life, which isn't amazing, but it's not irrelevant either. So aside from that, some of the spells that we are going to be casting that are going to be reduced mana, we can go through now with some enchantments. These are all going to be pretty annoying enchantments for our opponents. That's the theme of the deck. So we have Mystic Remora, cumulative upkeep 1. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you get to draw a card unless they pay 4, which is very, very good. The cumulative upkeep isn't a huge problem for us. We have a lot of mana rocks to help pay for it, and we don't have to keep it alive all the time. We could play it, get a little bit of value, let it die, let it go to the graveyard, and move on with the game. So it's very effective. Search for Azcanta, I was talking about, along with Manascape Refractor. This allows us to fix our draws in the early game. Also fills our graveyard because we are playing some Delve cards. And it allows us to flip over and dig for our win conditions once we flip it. When we're looking for Approach of the Second Sun, this helps us get there sooner. After it's the 7th card on the bottom, we can clear 4 cards out of the way immediately with this and get to our win condition even faster. We also have Aura of Silence, which is a taxing effect on artifacts and enchantments our opponent controls and makes them cost 2 more. And we could sacrifice it to get rid of a pesky artifact or enchantment if we would like to. A lot of the time, we're just going to let it sit on the battlefield and tax their artifacts and enchantments while we move forward with our game plan. With a deck like this, we're going to kind of have a target on our backs a lot of the times. So we have some effects and some cards to help mitigate that a little bit. Propaganda. Creatures can't attack us unless their controllers pay 2 for each that are attacking us. And we have Ghostly Prison, the exact same card. We have redundant effects of this because both on the battlefield together, it makes our opponents have to pay 4 to attack us with each guy they attack us with. So it's very important that we can protect ourselves and get to our end game. Then we have Rhystic Study. It's a blue deck. It's commander. You play Rhystic Study. It's a tax effect and a draw effect. It's very good. You should play it. Smothering Tithe, same thing. If you have the ability to play it, taxing your opponents or having them let you make treasures to accelerate is very good. It's one of the most powerful white enchantments in Commander. And then this is a newer addition, but Shark Typhoon. If we're not going to win the game with Approach of the Second Sun, we have to win the game somehow. This allows us to play a long game where we can protect ourselves. We resolve this early for hopefully a reduced mana cost. And then every spell that we cast after this makes a shark. So we get block with sharks, we get attack with sharks, we get build an army of sharks around us and win the game that way if we're not getting there with Approach of the Second Sun. Beyond that, we have some Planeswalkers. We have a few that look a little underwhelming. Well, one that looks underwhelming, but when you think of it and in the context of this deck, it is very, very solid. Let me get the Arbiter back up there. First one we have is Dovin, Hand of Control. Now what this does is artifacts, instants, and sorceries our opponents cast cost 1 more colorless to cast. And it has a minus ability, you -1 until the end of turn. You can prevent all damage dealt to you by a creature or by a permanent an opponent controls. And that's fine. We're not going to minus this a lot. We just kind of want to let this sit on the battlefield, kind of like an enchantment. And the taxing effect is very relevant for us. And the reason that this isn't underwhelming in our deck is because when Grand Arbiter is in play, this is a 1-mana Planeswalker. Because it is both blue and white, it costs 1 mana for us. So for a very little investment, we have a Planeswalker that can protect us by minusing on one of their harmful creatures, and also that taxes them even more, which is what the name of the game is here. We have Little Teferi Time Raveler. Anybody that's played Standard in the last 2 years knows this card. It's obnoxious. It's a Japanese copy, so for those who don't, I'll explain it to you. It's a blue, a white, and 1, which in our deck most of the time is going to be a blue and a white. Its static ability says your opponents can't play their spells at instant speed. And so counter spells don't matter to you anymore. It has a +1 that says you can play your sorceries at instant speed. And then its -3 is you bounce an artifact, an enchantment, or a creature back to its owner's hand and draw a card. So this card is very pesky and annoying, and we're going to want it in play on the turn that we try to approach for the second sun. Because it allows us to cast our spells without having to worry about our opponents countering them, because they can't play at instant speed. We have Narset Parter of Veils. This is another card that slows our opponents down. It says that each opponent can't draw more than 1 card per turn. So all of our opponents who are playing different sort of effects that allow them to draw more cards, they can't. And then for a -2, we could look through the top 4, grab a non-creature, non-land, put it in our hand. Very, very good. Jace the Mind Sculptor is Jace the Mind Sculptor. It's Brainstorm every turn. It's very effective, very good. Can be a win condition, or it can help you take out one opponent. Not going to happen often, but it's incredible. Teferi, Master of Time. You can activate this on everybody's turn. So it draws a card every turn and lets you sift through your deck, which is very good with Approach of the Second Sun. If you get to a point where you can ultimate with this, which you can because you're activating it and you can plus it every turn, you get to take 2 extra turns and essentially win the game. And then Big Teferi. This card's amazing. Those of you that have played Standard when this was around know how good it is. It's a win condition in and of itself, but it also allows you to dig through your deck even more, and it protects itself. So that's our Planeswalker suite. Moving on, we have our creatures. Starting off, we have Snapcaster Mage. This allows us to rebuy any of the instants and sorceries that you're going to see after this. It's very powerful. Everybody knows Snapcaster. Very good. Recurring spells is very, very good in Commander. Drainath Magistrate. This says that your opponents can't play their commanders. That's at the base level. For 1 or 2 mana in our deck, your opponents can't cast their commanders. Incredible. Grand Abolisher. This is a 2-drop that allows us to do whatever we want on our turns, and our opponents can't do anything about it. So we want this in play the turn that we're going to approach for the second sun. That's the main purpose here. Otherwise, it's a pretty unassuming 2/2 bear, but it allows us to do our thing while preventing our opponents from doing theirs. Same thing with Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. When I first wanted to build this deck, it was going to be more of a Death and Taxes build. Thalia is very good because non-creature spells cost everybody 1 more, but because of Grand Arbiter making our stuff cost 1 less, it balances out, and there are cases where it doesn't matter at all and we still get cost reduction. And again, this plus Grand Arbiter in play, making everybody's stuff cost 2 more, is insanely good. And then we have Big Thalia, Heretic Cathar, making all of our opponents' lands and creature, or non-basic lands, and creatures come into play tapped is very effective, very good. Linvala, Keeper of Silence. Our opponents can't activate the crazy busted stuff that their commanders do that are built around. That's really good. Additionally, Torrential Gearhulk. Rebuying instants is very good. We have a lot of powerful instants in our deck that we can replay, and being able to have redundancy in your singleton deck is very good. And then the best creature in the deck by far, Consecrated Sphinx. This card's insane, especially in multiplayer. Whenever an opponent draws a card, you get to draw 2, which is amazing. There's going to be times where we get this down for 4 mana, so this is coming down a turn or 2 early a lot of the time because of the nature of our deck and how it's built. So that's very nice and very important. Then we have a lot of card draw, things that we're going to want to flash back with that Snapcaster Mage and that Torrential Gearhulk. Brainstorm. Brainstorm's amazing. Cantrips are great. Ponder, same thing. Factor Fiction. This is a lot of fun in multiplayer. You get to choose the player who you think is going to give you the best split, and then play that card and let them do their worst, and then you generally get to draw 2 to 2.5, 3 cards sometimes. Very, very good. Treasure Cruise. We have a lot of ways to get things in the graveyard, so this becomes closer and closer to Ancestral Recall because of Delve. Very good. One of my favorite cards. Love Treasure Cruise. Same thing. Dig Through Time. This, with Approach of the Second Sun, we approach, it goes 7th card from the top of our library, then we dig through time and we get it back to it immediately. And then Blue Sun Zenith and Sphinx's Revelation. Both of these are X draw spells that allow us to draw a ton of cards because of Grand Arbiter, especially with Sphinx's Rev. If we Sphinx's Rev with Grand Arbiter in play, we don't have to put any extra mana into it, and we already get 2 cards. Everything above that is crazy good. Same thing with Blue Suns. We automatically get 1 card off of 3 mana, and then it scales much bigger because of that. Excuse me. Then we have a removal suite, because it's important to remove your opponent's threats while you're doing your thing. We have Swords to Plowshares. Swords to Plowshares is the best removal spell in all of Magic the Gathering. Exile literally anything, any creature giving you a problem. Path to Exile, same thing, slightly worse. You give them 1 more land in play, but it's still very good. Along those lines, we have Winds of Abandon, which is just like Path to Exile, but it's overload cost. You could pay 6 and exile all of their creatures. And then they get to go get a bunch of basic lands into play, but at that point, hopefully you're moving on to do bigger, better things. Again, with the overload theme, Cyclonic Rift. Everybody knows Cyclonic Rift. If you're playing blue, you should play Cyclonic Rift. That's it. It's an incredible sweeper and very, very worth having. Very flexible, too. That's why I love the overload spells. Council's Judgment is basically white Vindicate, although in Commander it can get political, and Will of the Council is very interesting and very fun, but most of the time you're going to exile the main threat that you want to, and some of the time you'll get to exile that plus another problematic threat. So it's very good and very handy to play with, and very worth including. Detention Sphere. This is just an Oblivion Ring with slight upside. If somebody's playing tokens, you can take out all of their tokens. But it's also being blue and white. If we have Thalia in play and Grand Arbiter, Grand Arbiter actually reduces it by 2, so we don't get Thalia taxed for it. That's the main reason it's here over Oblivion Ring. But very good. This next card actually is going to be replaced. I don't recommend playing this card. It is Return to Dust. It's made to exile an enchantment artifact. I would rather be playing Heliod's Intervention. I just don't have one handy right now. I'm going to get one very soon. Play Heliod's Intervention, the X removal spell for enchantments and artifacts. It's very good, much better than this. But you still need some sort of artifact and enchantment hate in your deck. Fractured Identity is an incredible card in Cube, one of my favorite Cube cards. In EDH, it gets really nutty and very silly because it exiles any permanent that you have a problem with, but everybody else gets a copy of that permanent. So it takes a lot of thinking and a lot of judgment to use this card in an effective manner, because if you're getting rid of the threat from one person, everybody else getting a copy of that threat could be worse. But it's fun, and I love the card, so I wanted to play it here. Also, the cost reduction thing. All of the gold cards are going to be very, very powerful because we're going to get to play them for a lot less. This costs 3 mana in our deck most of the time. Now we have some Wraths. Supreme Verdict, Uncounterable Wrath of God. Nothing more to say than that. Time Wipe is, for us, oftentimes 3 mana. Board Wipe, but it lets us return Grand Arbiter to our hand and then wipe the board. And then we get to play Grand Arbiter again, and we're right back on top of things and in front of the pack. And then Terminus, we have the top to set up the Miracle. We have Brainstorm and stuff like that to help set up the Miracle. And it's a sweeper, and it gets around Indestructible and stuff like that. Putting all creatures to the bottom of their owner's libraries is very effective, very good, so worth having, and you definitely need sweepers. And then the rest of the deck is counterspells, because that's how I roll. We have a lot of counterspells, a lot of free counterspells. So first off, we have Pact of Negation. This is mainly going to be used when you're trying to finish the game with Approach of the Second Sun. A free counterspell that you have to pay for on your upkeep. Hopefully we're using this and there's not going to be another upkeep. The game's over. But oftentimes, too, this helps us win a counter battle for other things, or just to stop our opponent's big spells or whatever. Very powerful, very good spell, very much worth having. Then we have good old school counterspell. My favorite art, Tempest art for counterspell. Of course, we're playing counter magic, counterspells and auto-include. This next one is not the most powerful in EDH, but still pretty powerful, but I'm eventually going to replace with a mana drain, and that's mana leak. Counter target spell unless its controller pays an additional 3. It's good early game. With cost reduction, it can be 1 mana, so it's very good, very powerful, but it does run out of value quickly in the game. It's more of an early game counterspell, so it's not the most powerful, and like I said, it's coming out soon. Once I pick up a mana drain, it will be a mana drain. Render Silent allows you to counter a target spell and then stop what your opponent's doing for the rest of the entire turn. Now, whether you use this on something they're casting on their turn to stop, to basically time lock them and end their turn, that's one thing. Or if you're using it to try to resolve your approach of the Second Sun, or try to resolve a big spell for yourself, and you want to be able to protect it and make sure that opponent doesn't have the ability to cast more stuff on your turn or to try to further stop you, it's very good. Then we have more free counter spells. We have Force of Negation. Free negate's really good. We're always going to have a lot of blue cards in our hand because we draw a bunch of cards, so this is going to be very handy to use and very effective. Fierce Guardianship, another one. It's free negate. When our commander's in play, this costs no money, counter target non-creature spell. It's incredible, very good. Cryptic Command. I mentioned the shenanigans before with Mystic Sanctuary, but this card does it all. You know, Cryptic Command, counter target spell, bounce a creature, or a permanent rather, tap all your opponent's creatures and draw a card. Most time we're going to counter something and draw a card. With Arbiter in play, it only costs 3. Very, very good. Then we have Force of Will, free counter spells. This is the most powerful counter spell ever printed, and it's not close. Auto include, gotta have it. Then Mystic Confluence, which is like Cryptic Command 2.0. It's very effective. You choose 3, and you can choose the same one more than once. So it has Mana Leak on it, it has Unsummon on it, and it has Draw a Card on it. So at its very worst, you can end step it and draw 3 cards. At its best, you can Mana Leak something and draw 2 cards, or Mana Leak something, bounce something, and draw a card. Very flexible. I love modal spells for this reason. And the last card in the deck is another modal spell and also a newer card, and it is Sublime Epiphany. This card is bonkers. This one says choose 1 or more, so you can choose all of these modes, and there's a whole bunch of them. Counter target spell, and then counter target activator triggered ability, so Stifle, and then return target non-land permanent to his owner's hand, and then create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, and then target player draws a card. So at the least, it's counter target spell, bounce something, and draw a card. At the most, and this has happened where I've had Consecrated Sphinx in play, you counter something, you bounce something, you create a token that's a copy of Consecrated Sphinx, so you have 2 Consecrated Sphinx, which is bonkers, and then you draw a card. Or you make, if you have a second Consecrated Sphinx in play, you make your opponent draw a card, then you draw 4 cards. It's nuts. Card is a lot of fun, and it's really fun when you get to play it and just cause havoc on the whole table. So I love modal spells, like I said, and this one is definitely one I wanted to play with. Also, it's 6 mana, but with our commander in play, it's 5 mana. If we have the commander and a Sapphire Medallion in play, it's 4 mana, and we have a lot of acceleration and a lot of rocks. So that is it. That's the deck. It's a lot of fun. I really love playing this sort of deck in every format. I'm like a control player at heart, and I love taxing effects. My legacy deck is Death and Taxes, of course, and beyond that, in every format I can, I generally try to play either taxes or control, and this kind of blends it all together. So what do you guys think? Let me know if you have any ideas, or if you've played this sort of build before or similar builds or played against them. Let me know some card choices that you would make. Let me know some things I'm forgetting, or anything like that, I definitely want to hear about it in the comments below. I'll put a link or a list in the description of the full deck list, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you.